In the history of the world, there are some insane stories about kings, battles, and empires. But this story is completely different. The most dangerous person here wasn't a king. He was a slave, a guy whose loyalty became a weapon for total destruction. This is maybe the craziest story of ambition ever. We're talking about a man who the world saw as literal property. But through pure evil genius, he climbed his way to the top of an empire, just so he could tear it all down. He made kings, then he killed kings. This is a story of a servant who became the master. History is full of brutal betrayals, but this one is an absolute nightmare. This is the story of a man who started as a slave, but in the final days of a dynasty, he grabbed power in the most savage way possible. He blinded his masters and murdered their kids just to get a throne he was uneven supposed to have, only to meet an end. So gruesome, people were terrified to even whisper about it. This is the story of the man who basically became sultan only to be killed by his own men, and the legend of the prince who was skinned alive. Our story starts in the 1300s, in the massive Delhi Sultanate. It's run by the Khilji dynasty, and the guy in charge is Sultan Alauddin Khilji, one of the most powerful and ruthless rulers you'll ever hear about. This guy was an absolute monster. He murdered his own uncle to get to the throne. He was a military genius who crushed Mongol invasions that destroyed other empires. He had more money than you can possibly imagine. He had spies everywhere. And if you even looked at him wrong, you were done. This guy trusted no one because he knew exactly what it took to get power. But now it's 1315, and the great sultan is a total mess. He's sick. He's losing his mind to paranoia, and his control over the empire is gone. The court, which used to be completely terrified of him, is now full of schemers who want the throne. And right at the center of all this chaos is one man, Malik Kafur. Malik Kafur wasn't a noble. He wasn't a prince. He was a Hindu slave captured when Alauddin conquered Gujarat in 1299. People said he was incredibly handsome and super smart, which caught a general's eye. They bought him for 1,000 dinars, so they nicknamed him Hazar Dinar, the 1,000-dinar man. When he was brought to the Sultan, Kafur's rise was unbelievable. He went from a nobody slave to a trusted servant, then a top general, and finally the naive, the second in command of the entire empire. He was Alauddin's best general, leading armies into southern India, where no Delhi ruler had ever conquered, and he came back with insane amounts of gold, jewels, and elephants. To the paranoid sultan, Kafur was the perfect weapon. He had no family, no powerful friends. His entire life depended on the sultan. Alauddin saw him as a tool, someone whose loyalty was absolute. The historian Ziauddin Barani wrote that, in his final years, the sultan had fallen deeply and madly in love with the Malikan, trusting him with everything. This was Malik Kafur, the slave who became the second most powerful man in the empire. He was the sultan's right-hand man, his general, his everything. And as the sultan was dying, Kafur was staring at ultimate power with only one thing in his way: the sultan's kids. With Sultan Alauddin getting sicker, the court was a ticking time bomb. And nobody knew how to play this game better than Malik Kafur. He had been waiting for years for this exact moment. The main heirs to the throne were Alauddin's sons, Kaiser Khan and Shati Khan. Kaiser Khan was the oldest and was supposed to be the next sultan. He had a super powerful crew backing him, led by his father-in-law, Alp Khan. This was the established order, and Kafur wanted to burn it all down. To Kafur, the princes weren't royalty. They were just roadblocks. He was secretly hungry for power, and he knew if Kaiser Khan became sultan, he'd be thrown out or killed. For a guy who had tasted that much power, there was no way he was going to let that happen. So he launched his attack, not with an army, but with whispers in the dark. He knew the sultan was paranoid about betrayal, since that's how he got power himself. So Kafur fed that paranoia, telling the sultan that Kaiser Khan and Al-Khan Han were plotting a coup just waiting for him to die. He told Alauddin that his Khan was a party boy who didn't care about the empire. He faked messages and made up evidence of treason. He claimed Alpin was building his own private army to make his son-in-law a puppet king. Day after day, Kafur dripped poison into the sultan's ear, cutting him off from everyone. He convinced Alauddin that his own family was his biggest threat. He got rid of his rivals one by one. His biggest target was Alp Khan. Kafur convinced the sultan that Alp Khan was the ringleader of the conspiracy and tricked Alauddin into ordering his execution. With Alpin dead, Kaiser Khan had just lost his biggest ally. The final move was turning the father against his son. Kafur convinced the Sultan that Kaiser Khan's popularity was proof he was a traitor. He tricked the prince into leaving the capital, basically banishing him. When the heartbroken Kaiser Khan came back to see his dying dad, Alauddin actually hugged him. It looked like the family bond might actually win, but Kafur was just too good at this game, convinced the delirious Sultan that the prince was faking it. The Sultan finally snapped. He gave Malik Kafur the one thing he wanted, the power to imprison his own sons. Kaiser Khan and his brother Shadi Khan were arrested and thrown into the fortress of Gwalior. Their mom was put under house arrest. The heirs were gone. The rivals were dead. The path was clear. Malik Kafur, the 1,000-dinar slave, was now in charge. This was just the beginning of the horror. With the real heirs in prison, Malik Kafur had all the power, but just locking them up wasn't enough. In the 14th century, a living prince, even in jail, could inspire a rebellion. To secure his power forever, Kafur did something unbelievably cruel. He ordered them to be blinded. In a cold cell in Gwalior, Prince Kaiser Khan, the man born to be emperor, was held down while a hot metal rod was shoved into his eyes. This was a message. A blind man could never be sultan. It was a public execution of his royal status. His brother, Shadi Khan, got the exact same treatment. The news that his sons had been blinded was the final shock for the dying Sultan Alauddin. Whether it was from grief, or as some people whisper, a final dose of poison from Kafur. Sultan Alauddin Khilji died on January 4, 1316. The mighty tyrant was dead. Kafur did not waste a single second. The very next day, he presented a fake will from the Sultan. It disinherited the blinded Kaiser Khan and named Alauddin's youngest son, a 5-year-old kid named Shihabwin, as the new Sultan. A child was the perfect puppet. Kafur put him on the throne, made himself regent, and became the de facto Sultan of Delhi. To make it even crazier, he forced Alauddin's widow, the new kid Sultan's mom, to marry him. He was now the stepfather of the king he controlled. This was the ultimate power grab. The slave was now running the entire empire. Everyone in the court was terrified. Every morning, he'd hold a fake ceremony with the child sultan to look official, then send the kid away and rule like a dictator. But Kafur knew he was on thin ice. The nobles hated him. He had no real claim to the throne. So he turned his attention to the last threat. Alauddin's teenage son, Mubarak Khan. Kafur had Mubarak Khan arrested and gave the order. He was to be blinded too. The assassins were on their way. The Khilji dynasty was about to be wiped out by the very man their father trusted most. This was Malik Kafur's ultimate betrayal. He didn't just steal the throne. He brutally destroyed the family he was supposed to protect. For 35 days, Malik Kafur ruled the Delhi Sultanate. It was a short reign, but it was 35 days of absolute terror. This puppet king on the throne, Kafur started a bloody purge. Anyone even suspected of being loyal to the old dynasty, nobles, guards, officers, was arrested, had their stuff taken, or was just executed. Delhi was filled with fear. Nobody was safe. Kafur trusted no one and was trying to build a new empire based on pure terror. And in this insane environment, a dark legend started. The history books say the princes were blinded and imprisoned, but the stories on the street were way more gruesome. The most horrific one was about the oldest prince, Kaiser Khan. The legend says that after being blinded on Kafur's orders, the prince was flayed, skinned alive. Now, did this actually happen? Probably not. There's no real proof in the history books. It's almost certainly a legend born out of how terrified people were. But the point of this story isn't about whether it's true. It's about what it says about Malik Kafur. People believed he was capable of something this horrible. His cruelty was so extreme that the most nightmarish thing you can imagine seemed like something he would totally do. The legend of the skinned prince became the ultimate symbol of his tyranny. It turned him from a power-hungry politician into a literal monster. This legend also clears up our title. While it was Malik Kafur, the fake sultan who was killed by his own men, it was his victim, Prince Kaiser Khan, who was rumored to have been skinned alive. The fact that their fates got mixed up just shows you how chaotic and brutal this time was. Kapur's reign of terror was at its peak. He had everything he ever wanted. He was the master of a huge empire. His enemies were gone, and he was unstoppable. He was, for 35 days, the Sultan. But a throne built on fear is the most fragile thing in the world. And the terror he used to get power was about to blow up in his face. Malik Kafur's bloody reign lasted just 35 days. The very men he commanded, the elite palace guards called the Pikes, had been Sultan Alauddin's personal bodyguards for years. They were loyal to their dead master and watched in horror as Kafur destroyed his family. They saw him blind the princes and terrorize the court and knew they were probably next. The breaking point was when Kafur sent these guards to blind the last prince, Mubarak Khan. The story goes that the prince made one last desperate move. He reminded the guards of their loyalty to his father and warned them that a slave who betrays his master will definitely betray his servants. Then he threw them his jeweled necklace, a bribe to save his life and pay for revenge. Whether it was the bribe or loyalty, the Pikes made their move. That night in February 1316, the guards stormed Malik Kafur's bedroom. One of the guards, who was allowed to have a weapon in the palace, struck the first blow. His friends rushed in and beheaded the man who had been the most feared person in the empire. The de facto sultan was killed by his own men. The 1,000-dinar slave, the genius general, the ultimate betrayer, was dead on the floor. It was a brutal end to a brutal reign. The assassins immediately freed Mubarak Khan. First, he was made regent for his child brother. But a few months later, he did exactly what Kafur would have done. He had his little brother blinded and thrown in prison, taking the throne for himself. And in the most insane twist, when the guards who saved him came asking for rewards, the new Sultan Mubarak Shah had them all executed. In this world, being loyal could get you killed. Malik Kafur's legacy is insane. He's not remembered as a sultan. He's a warning about ambition. Betrayal didn't just get him killed, it destroyed the entire Khalji dynasty. Alauddin's massive empire fell into chaos. Mubarak Shah's reign was a disaster. And he was also murdered 4 years later by his own favorite, just like his father was betrayed by Kafur. Soon after, the dynasty was completely gone. Malik Kafur, the slave who rose higher than anyone, ended up destroying his master's entire legacy. He was a military genius who conquered half of India, but his power games in Delhi were his downfall. He is remembered forever as the ultimate betrayer. A man whose hunger for power was so massive it destroyed everything and everyone around him, including himself. The legend of the prince being skinned alive might not be true, but it's the perfect horrifying symbol for what Malik Kafur did to the empire. He ripped it apart, piece by bloody piece. The story of Malik Kafur is an absolutely insane look at power, loyalty, and ambition. This guy started with nothing. He was literally property and rose to command millions. He was a product of a brutal system, and he used that brutality to try and beat it. His 35-day reign of terror is one of the most wild and violent moments in the history of the Delhi Sultanate. A short, bloody chapter that brought down a whole empire. But what do you think? Was Malik Kafur a total monster? Or was he just a creation of the crazy, paranoid world he lived in? Was it pure ambition? Or was he getting revenge on the system that enslaved him? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you thought this story was as crazy as we did, smash that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories. Thanks for watching.